Meow.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. No, this came a little bit unexpected. So, yeah, this is Night Flight, and as you can see, Enna Reittort is back, and we will talk about the human path forward. Enna, when I sent you the email, you emailed me back. It is high time that we get our act together. So, could you elaborate a little bit what you meant by
We have 5 hours.
sure?
Well, for one thing, I don't think we need to spend time analyzing all the stuff that's going wrong.
Yeah.
I think, everybody, particularly in your circle, everybody knows all that by heart. Um, but I think we need to get clear that it's not, the human path that we need to take is not simply the opposite of all the shit that's being done to us. Um, it, but it needs to take stock of the fact that the challenge that we're under is, I think, of unprecedented magnitude, and it's it literally is creating a bifurcation within the human race, for
Hmm.
want of a better word, right? I mean, there are those who want to, become augmented with machines. Those who want to become merged with machines. There are those who just are going to be happy to live in their smart cities and, be entertained and receive universal basic income. And then there's going to be all the others who who want a human path. But the other problem about those who want the human path is that there are those who want it to be under the auspices of God, and those who understand it from a human power kind of. I mean, there are all sorts of different, you know, personalities that are coming into this. And what I'm seeing the least, and this is what I find a little bit concerning, is that most of us are not going into the depth of who we are, because that's where the foundation of what we are going to be building resides. And the biggest issue that I see more and more is that people are stuck in their minds.
Mm.
They're stuck in the thinking mind, which our modern culture has developed to a maximum degree, not necessarily with the equal development of critical thinking. But even critical thinking is not enough. The thinking has to come from the larger being that we are. I don't know whether you're familiar with this scientist, brilliant scientist, Russian, who recently passed away, I think in a suspicious manner, called Pyotr Garyaev,
No, I don't
who,
know.
okay, no, it's fascinating. He worked with genetics and he worked with language, and he realized that what we call DNA is actually what he called a linguistic vibrational code. And he called it the code of God. Okay, for Russians, God is a reality. It's not quite the reality that we think of, in the West. And so, he, with his machines and his experimentations, found that what we call DNA, the stuff that they are reading and decoding and putting through CRISPR and messing around with, amounts to maximum 5% of the code that makes up who we are. So there's the 95% of you and me that we need to bring online, to bring on board, because that's where we're going to discover who we are by building what we need to build, by doing what we're here to do as humans. So, I mean, I find that absolutely fascinating, but not intellectually. Where does one go and look for those 95%? And at any rate, to build something new, if there is even a small but sufficient number of us who's interested in exploring those 95%, we're going to start having all sorts of mutual cooperation in ways that we cannot imagine now. At a I don't want to use the word quantum, at a subtle level, the understanding that we can have because you've got those 95% and I've got those 95%. And the resonance that can happen there is something that we cannot imagine with the kind of cognition and the kind of sensory experience that we have for the time being. So, the human path going ahead is phenomenally exciting, but nobody can say what it's going to be.
Mm.
It's going to be what we make it to be.
Yeah. Would you agree that humanity in the overall picture had a bad start?
No,
Let me tell me what I mean by that.
yeah.
Yeah, you already said no. Okay.
No, no, no. No, but
What? Oh, you're breaking up.
the nuance, I mean, there's very definitely nuance. So, there's also internet is unstable because this is the monsoon season.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Okay, no, it's monsoon season here, so occasionally, I've plugged myself in. I've done everything to make it as stable as possible, but inevitably, But this happens, it happens even in America.
Yeah,
Lots
yeah.
of podcasts that one listens to, people are breaking also. So it's not just the third world.
No, 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 no. And as Joe Atwill always said, he lives in California and he says, I'm living in a third world country.
So there. So there. That's called poetic. It's called poetic justice.
Yeah. So what I meant is, okay, when you look at the situation from a Judeo-Christian perspective, then you have the creation of mankind, and then you have fallen angels, and it goes downhill from there. When you look from the perspective of the, let's say, Anunnaki, yeah, allegedly there was a good guy and a bad guy. I don't think there was a good guy in that story. They all had their agenda. And yeah, they had their specific uses for humans, and other than that, they were not really interested in us. So, and then, of course, you can look at it as, you know, we we come from monkeys, and
That's out. No, 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 that's out. That's out.
yeah, I
That's
know,
out.
but yeah, I know it's out, but it's still there. I meet a lot of people who still believe that. So and then you have this when you look at it through that lens, then you have, you know, we are just this assembly of random DNA material, and you know, nothing has meaning here. So I don't know. Whatever we look at, there were always, you know, huge, huge obstacles from the get. Not maybe not in the very
Yeah.
beginning, but shortly after.
Yeah. Okay. But the stories that you're referring to, on the one hand, they may very well be kind of metaphors
Hmm.
which were used at different point in time that got distorted over time as these stories went down the generations, were translated, this, that, and the other. You've got the other end of the metaphoric horror is, when we are told humans are made in God's image. Um, okay, you take out God, you take image, and then you start wondering, well, what does it mean? If we understand that gods are only, they're a transitory phenomenon in the long, long, long story, not history, way back when, story of, the humans with this planet, the story of humans with Earth. That's the big story. When did that start? And what kind of humans were there? There's the if we look at the paleontological aspect, the Anunnaki, did they mess around with Homo sapiens or Homo sapiens sapiens? That's to say, people like you and me, or did they mess around with Neanderthals or Australopithecus or whatever? We don't know. But if they were a more primitive variety of hominid, not monkeys, but still more primitive than what we have now, well, okay, perhaps they messed around with those. And so perhaps the the result of that messing around is roaming around the earth somewhere. Some race somewhere is the result of that. But Homo sapiens sapiens, that basically is, the dominant human that we have nowadays. I, you know, I, I I don't think mentally about these things very much. I put them in my contemplative pipe and smoke it. And, then in contemplation, there's, you know, some pretty wild things that come up. And one of the wild things that comes up, and that to me is increasingly true, and I'm going to say this for the first time, like publicly. So, whatever, is that the business of the emergence of the being that we call Earth into physical form, together with the emergence of the beings that we call humans into physical form. It was not the business of 7 days, 6 days that went beep, 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 beep. And on this, his fingers got so tired on the seventh day that he needed to rest. I mean, if one places oneself like in the non-shoes of very immense, um, subtle beings, call them souls, call them whatever, subtle beings. The the proto being of Earth and the proto being of human, because I start from the point that these two entities work together, and that's what the Gnostic myth of Sophia points to, with its own distortions. And they got into the business of what we call creation, manifestation. But that's not an easy thing to do. We have these very naive ideas of magic, precisely with the god who went like that, and boop, there was water, and boop, there was trees. Um, how subtle beings are going to operate from whatever it is that is their creativity that we cannot understand from what we today think is creativity, to make manifest gradually, the things of nature, the minerals, of this, that, and the other, taking particles from outer space, channeling their own sort of energies, differentiating their own energies inside themselves to make all these. I mean, the mind boggles if you start to wonder how it is that they started to bring manifestation into shape. So, I'm there, I just contemplate that mystery. I cannot explain it, but to me, it feels very real. And it feels very real that over the millions of years, there were different stages of manifestation. And, they produced different creatures, beings who manifested different forms of hominids, plus monkeys, plus animals, plus trees. There's the very fascinating sort of commonality between us humans and trees in terms of verticality. And the fact that, we are, like trees, antennae between, the cosmos above and the cosmos that is embodied in Mother Earth below our feet. So, if you look at these things like that, without a desire to try and explain it rationally, because it cannot, but if you start feeling into the sheer adventure of what it must have been for those two prime beings to start producing all this over millions and millions of years. But you start with the point that we, the humans, originate from that prime soul, being, subtle being, that differed from the prime being who would become our planet Earth. And she embodies what we call the feminine principle, and the human embodies the so-called masculine principle, which we must not take to mean, having masculine features and feminine features. It's way more complicated than that. And it interpenetrates in all sorts of ways that are, too many and too extraordinary for us to, there again, to understand. But then, if that is so, and then that prime human, and this is apparent in one of the ancient Indian myths of Mahaprakriti on the prime feminine and Mahapurusha on the prime masculine. Now, what they say in that myth is that Mahapurusha, the prime masculine, sacrificed himself to produce all the animals and all the humans. They introduced the motive of sacrifice. You don't need to. You don't need to. Once you've got the system of holographic reality and fractals, we all, each one of us, contains the totality of that prime being. But every one of us with variations. Consequently, now that I live with that feeling, I can't say it's an understanding, I can't say it's a thought, I can't say it's a system, but now that I live with that feeling, I consider the fact of being a human being a hell of a phenomenal opportunity, reality, duty. I mean, it's humbling and it's extraordinarily exciting.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's a challenge and it's wonderful, it's exciting, it's mysterious, and yet we have managed to boil it down somehow into
Into nothing, yeah.
yeah.
I mean, we are on the edge of annihilation, on the edge of, basically collective suicide, whether, by commission or by omission. But, and okay, people are saying it's the end of the world. It's the end. I like what Cliff High says. He says this is going to be the end of the world as we know it.
Yeah.
And that's a very good thing because we have put ourselves into a dead end. But it's a good thing that we've, the main thing is for us to realize, okay, it's a bloody dead end. How far back do we have to go to find, that road on which we were, and we were going in some kind of a right direction? And that's where trying to sort of tap into, I don't like these words, trying to be a bit more of those 95% is really, really going to be absolutely essential. That's what I call the natural human mystic, as opposed to all the fake esoterics, the occultism that has trapped us. And we get fascinated by all those occult things, all the incredible things that they can do, the tricks of the, what I call the techno mind God.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. Like, it's like these, you put a smartphone in the hand of a small kid, you've addicted the kid to the smartphone for the rest of its life. It is fascinating. It has its own magic, but that is not the natural magic that is contained in our 95%. And through those 95% corresponding, communicating and expressing itself through the 5% that is what makes our physical bodies.
Mm.
When you start looking at it that way, it's incredibly, wow. I mean, God, I feel absolutely crushed by the immensity of who we actually are. And that doesn't make me feel like, oh, I'm Tarzan. It makes me feel like, oh shit. Now I have to be, I have to live with the responsibility of who I really are.
Mm. Do you think that these 95% are also multidimensional?
Of course,
Mhm.
of course.
Mhm.
I mean, if we are a fractal or a holographic duplicate of the prime human, and I think we can all agree that there is this prime human who is not God. I mean, God in whose image we are is a metaphor for that thing. Okay, it's a distortion. It's a metaphor. Um, if basically all of that is included in each one of us, then of course it's multidimensional. Then we don't even know what dimensions are. We know what is long, what is wide, and what is deep. Okay, we know volume. Plus, we know perhaps to some extent, the fourth dimension of time. Also, there again, most of our knowledge is extremely limited, and we should take it all as a metaphor for something way more, way more ungraspable for our minds as they are now. That's the other part of it. Our minds, they tell us, we use 5 to 10% of the thing that's in here, most of which is actually working in the field all around it. So we've got a hell of a lot of work to do. But, the thing is, in terms of the human path that we want to build, we have to be absolutely honest with ourselves and intellectually honest with ourselves in terms of wanting it to be completely aligned with mm, with
With
the
the best
potential
that
that
we can be?
we have. Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, let's not be judgmental in terms of, using good and bad. It's not, it's what if, Judith, what if this great adventure of, Mahaprakriti and Mahapurusha together in some absolutely extraordinary cosmic love affair that they had, what if the whole point was to create something that had never existed in the universe, does not yet exist, and that the universe is still waiting for us to make it happen? That's another big responsibility for us.
Mhm. Mhm. When you talked about the dead end that we
Yeah.
obviously have reached on so many levels, and you said how to figure out how how far back do we have to go to
Mm.
come to a point where it was more
Still,
natural.
yeah.
And but there again, you have an obstacle because what we call history has been pretty manipulated, and the way it is taught gives me the creeps. You
Yeah,
know,
it's
it,
boring.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I had a history teacher, my very first one. He was great. He, he taught Greeks, Romans, and so forth, and he had a way to, you know, put it into a story, and it was exciting, it was fascinating, it was easy to listen, and it was easy to memorize. But that was because of his,
Hmm.
yeah, how he, because of his presentation. You sometimes had the feeling you are there on the marketplace, or the way he told the story. So yeah, even there, you need to have a little bit of luck with your teacher or not. Yeah. And then, there comes a point when you have the impression, yeah, well, actually, it's a series of wars. Yeah, this war from
Hmm.
here to there, and then they were at each other's throats, and then came this war, and that is not the whole story.
That is so fucking boring. And at the same time, it is so sad because so many of us were sacrificed in the process because it was all about establishing, great kingdoms and the power of this or that king or queen so that they could impress the others. And then the popes who had to bring them all under, their umbrella. Hello, are you creating sunlight?
No, but you know what happened? Yeah, we have another thunder, and yeah, not lightning, but it got very dark right now, and it's raining cats and dogs.
Oh, okay, good. I'll send you a few elephants. Yeah, so well that's why I'm writing this this huge work about Russia, looking at at that history, which is so utterly boring and makes no sense at all. It makes no sense at all. It's very difficult for us to make sense of history, to understand where it comes from and where it's going. If it's just, the succession of battles, and occasionally you have a great painter who makes a great painting and, a composer who makes a great piece of music. But where are the people in all this? The people are so bloody absent from history. So I'm looking at it in terms of the people. Okay, the people are a collective, but they have stories that actually make up a story, and it's gripping. It's a detective story, Judith. So um, this is part of the process in which I'm looking at, as you say, the story and not the history. Um, and when we look at the story, then we can feel the large energy of the large. Let's say if each nation or each big city is one big oversoul within the, of great big oversoul of, the Mahapurusha, okay? Then each one of these local or regional or national oversouls represents something that moves processes forward in this or that direction, good or bad. So when one starts looking at history in terms of the story of the people, it takes on a completely different flavor, and we can start to recognize ourselves in those people, those little people who were crushed, who were tortured, who were exploited, who were raped. I mean, everything, right? Now, one thing I think is important, we need to recognize ourselves in those people. We need to digest that trauma. You know, we humanity, and this is a large part of what I said in the Krivda book, we need to purge. We need to have a catharsis of all the trauma that has been inflicted on us for the processes of history, those wars, the power of the great people, etc. And then we need to look at what is it that fed the energy of the people to survive all that, to continue, you know, uh, to farm, to continue to tell tales to their kids, to sing songs, to, use the remedies from the forest. What is it? So there is that very, very deep level of folk wisdom. Now, that folk wisdom has its roots in something way, way, way older, where, I mean, the sense of magic that you have in a fairy tale, a folk tale, it's real. If it weren't real, it would not speak to small kids when we read tales to them. There's something very real there. There is the real sense of magic, which is inherent in us, which, of course, our education, the schooling, rationality brushes away. But, you know, I'm privileged since I live in nature, and tropical nature is, I'm privileged that, I'm getting, a huge mouthful of nature's magic every day here. So to me, the magic in those folk tales and the magic of nature are fundamental parts of who we are and of the deep wisdom, felt wisdom. I mean, it's not intellectual knowledge, it's this knowingness that we have with the beings of nature and the animals. And when you are in that kind of state, well, animals respond to you. They come to you. I find the trees respond also. So I think that is the point of bifurcation. I think way back when, perhaps around the time of the Neolithic Revolution, we were still wiser than we are now because we were still communicating with spirits of the trees and spirits of the worms and things like that. It was normal for us. Our language was different. It was not, it had not become abstract as it is now. We're trapped in abstraction now. I think, many things that I say and write are misunderstood because people have abstract ideas of these things. I'm speaking from felt experience where this fellow is working with the rest of me, who, whatever that rest of me is, we can call it consciousness, we can call it soul. I find all these names extremely confusing. That's going to be another thing in our way going forward. We're going to have to reinvent language on a non-abstract basis.
Yeah. I agree. We have a lot of cute gadgets that we carry around with us that, for the most part, are not very helpful. But with our soul or with the awareness of who and what we are, we haven't kept up, So. But Anna, give me 1 minute. I get better lightning. It's really getting dark here. Yeah. Just, just wait. So we also are a species that is, yeah, I don't know, like, on the one hand, people. They do amazing things for others. Some even risk their lives for somebody, and then we can be um, so mean and so neglecting, so dehumanizing to others. I'll give you one short example. Um, Recently, in Tanzania, the government has banned the opposition because they are having elections this year, and the opposition leader has been incarcerated. And now his trial was coming up, and activists from Kenya, Uganda were going there, and because it was public, and they wanted to observe the trial. A huge bunch of them were deported back to Kenya, Uganda, wherever they came from, right away. They didn't even let them into the country. And then there were two activists, one lady from Uganda and another gentleman from Kenya. They were grabbed out of their hotels and arrested. They brought them to the police station. After a couple of hours, they went in legally. They didn't do anything wrong. They just wanted to observe the trial. And after a while, the central police station um, gave them over to some thugs that dragged them to a secret detention facility, and they were tortured there for 2 days, predominantly sexual torture. Yeah, and they gave a press conference after they were back, what had happened to them. So we are at a point, you know, you have events like that. And on the other hand, you have people who make a fuss if somebody uses the wrong pronoun, as if that is the worst that could have happened to anybody. It is so crazy. It's so insane. And I asked myself, yeah, okay, so you tortured those two young people for 2 days, and then you dumped them somewhere near the border. And how does that function? Then you go home to your wife and hug your kids and tell yourself you're a good guy, or what? Well, what is going on there?
Judith, those people, I mean, both those who get, their knickers in a knot over a wrong pronoun or a right pronoun for that matter, and those who do that, those kinds of atrocities for pleasure or for money, I mean, I'm afraid, they qualify as dead end humans.
Mhm.
And so, you know, the, presumably it would be possible to re-educate, to rehumanize all those people, but there are way too many of them. The job is much more urgent now for laying, at least the first sort of meters of a different way forward. The people who go through the kind of ordeal that you're describing, and there are so many cases, like that and worse. And if you think of all the stuff that is being done to kids,
Yeah.
when it happens to an adult, the adult is going to suffer, but can actually mm, process the horrible experience, find deeper depths inside him or herself that will give yet a further layer of meaning to their lives. I'm not saying this happens with everyone, but it's possible for an adult. For a kid, it's not possible. Those kiddie souls are traumatized in a way that is just, beyond. These are, that kind of thing is something that can only be contemplated and I think healed elsewhere, not in this manifest reality. It has to be healed out in some, cosmic paradise space. I don't know.
Mm.
Part of the way forward is also the fact of taking on board the because we all belong to the same great humanity, is taking on board the immense amount of suffering. If we can come to a realization of how much our respective souls have been traumatized over centuries and millennia, and we can digest that, and behind that, below that, discover the greater depth of who we are, then with that, we are capable of starting to, help the repair, the resurrection, so to speak, of those souls, that were damaged at the initial phases of life, where the damage is just it's total damage. So That's going to be part of the responsibility, that we have going forward. There's a hell of a lot to fix, to repair at a very, very, at a multidimensional level.
Mm.
And so for
I
that too,
yeah.
we need, we need to inhabit those 95% of who we are.
Mm. I have to admit, I sometimes ask myself if people who commit those atrocities on a regular basis, with what is basically their job description, um, I find myself asking the question, are they even fully human? I have my doubts, I have to
No,
admit
they're
that.
not. No, they're not. I think it's very clear. Judith, it's very clear. I mean, when you've given yourself over to dehumanization, by dehumanizing those that you torture, you're dehumanizing yourself even more.
Yeah.
Okay? And this is the problem of all the so-called elites who have been dehumanizing all the people that they've raped and enslaved and exploited for millennia. Their burden of, well, call it karma if you like, their burden is absolutely, I can't, begin to contemplate that.
Yeah. Um, One thing that these two activists said in their press conference, that the men who did it to them were very, very drunk. So, which can mean two things. Either they have a problem to do it while they are sober, or they use the alcohol so that they can become even more vicious. Yeah, it's
But
either
this is
one.
what they're doing. That's what they're doing. I mean, many armies provide, unlimited amounts of drugs to their soldiers to make them fearless, to take them out of this reality and to make them more vicious. That's the story of the invention of MSG. It
Mhm.
was, they were discovering that, the soldiers in Japan didn't want to fight. And so they worked with this molecule and they discovered that by pumping soldiers up with MSG, they made them much more fierce and fearless.
And we kept that as a food additive.
I mean, yes. And, it's everywhere in Asia. They put it in everything.
Mm.
I've had to fight like crazy, to get my local hubby weaned of this crap.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think we have it here in everything.
No, in the West, at least in Europe, but
Mm.
they put it in uh, quite a few of the processed foods because it does enhance the flavor.
Mm.
Um, the thing is, I mean, for people who are not used to it, it's going to make you feel very thirsty. It can give you a headache. So many people have an immediate reaction to it. Well, okay, then okay, cook at home. Don't
Yeah.
buy processed food and
So if if those people are not fully human, do you think that there is just something lacking, or is it, for lack of a better word, a subspecies that we don't really understand because they simply look like us, talk like us, move like us, and we
can be.
generally.
I think it's both. The
Mhm.
thing is, when you add on, like, okay, let's suppose the Anunnaki messed around with the DNA of a certain race of people, and so there's a bunch of people who carry that mixed DNA. And the Anunnaki, if they were not particularly nice people, well, at least epigenetically, some of that not niceness is still there, or perhaps some of it has been washed away. If the neighboring people were good people, perhaps the good people had a good, whatever. It can be so many factors. It can be so many factors, but what has been put into you as a foreign addition, uh, mm, it can displace some of the balanced parts of the 95% of who you are. So, it can be it can be a lack of something in those people. And it can also be, I mean, whatever. I think in that respect, Judith, there can be any number of combinations because there has been so much poison, mental, spiritual, physical, that has been used, in different parts of the world on different people, different animals also, uh, different ecosystems. I think, trying to do the catalog of all that is just, we just know that there's a hell of a lot of poison, but we don't need it to be there.
Yeah, there's also this, the natural psychopathy, people that are born with, they basically have no conscience, yeah. And then there is a learned psychopathy, yeah, that a secondary one.
Yeah.
And so with and then you have it combined with a malignant narcissist, yeah, meaning they are showing extreme signs of lack of empathy, exploitation, and entitlement. And I wonder why we as a human society produce so many of them.
Yeah, but that's, it can be a creative defense mechanism of human nature,
Mhm.
compensating for some other shit that happened. Um, the fact is, most people are not evil narcissists.
Mhm. Yeah,
So,
but
yeah.
funny
But,
enough,
Judith, the other big thing, yeah, go ahead.
uh, funny enough, we are producing more and more of them. Like let's say 20 years ago, the subject of narcissism wasn't a big deal. Yeah, yes, it was there,
Yeah.
but these days, it's a real subject, and a lot of professionals making channels on YouTube go through the various aspects. And why do they do that? Obviously, there is a need for that because a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people have experiences and don't really know, they might come out of a relationship and they might feel, oh my goodness, what just happened? What happened here? I feel on the one hand completely lousy, but also relieved that this person is out of my life. And then comes the self-shame orgy and what have you. So there was a need that people step up to the plate and explain it to people what to look
Sure.
out for. And yeah, I have the impression it's getting more.
Of course it is. I mean, like everything is getting more. All
Mm,
the diseases are getting worse. There's getting, there's in the ecology, in the human ecology, in the society, in in relations between people, in relations between the generations, everything is going to the dead end. It's happening all over the place. So the other part, however, of putting ourselves back on a really human path is to rediscover the actual power of, I don't know, call it goodness, love. I mean, these words are kind of empty when you're actually touching the deep substance of who we are, when we can get to re-inhabit what is the original state of who we are is.
This was the public hour. For full access of the entire interview, please join our Patreon community. Thank you.